Well, the UFC promised history for its much-anticipated Madison Square Garden debut, and they certainly delivered on that front. In fact, I should clarify the statement, Conor McGregor delivered on that front, because on the UFC's 23rd birthday, Conor McGregor became the first fighter in the promotion's history to hold two titles in two different weight classes at the same time. He is now the champion in the 145-pound featherweight division, and as a result of his second-round TKO win over Eddie Alvarez tonight, he is now the lightweight 155-pound champion as well. What a night. We are going to digest it right here on our MMAfighting.com wrap-up show. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani. It is very early Sunday morning here in New York City. I'm being joined by our own Marc Raimondi and, of course, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Marc, let me start with you. A long time ago, you actually told our bosses at MMAfighting.com that no matter what, you wanted to be here. You wanted to cover this event in person. You are a proud New Yorker, despite the fact that you now currently reside on the West Coast. Considering everything that happened, from Conor's win to the draw to the Romero win, I mean, just going down the line, just put the experience being here at MSG, watching a UFC event into words.
It was, I tweeted this out on the MMA Fighting account right after a few minutes after the win. Is like this is going to be an event that gets spoken about and talked about and remembered for many years down the line. I mean, I'm talking about 20, 30, 40 years. People will be able to point to this as a historical moment for the sport, for McGregor, for the UFC, and just being here, it was pretty nice. It was pretty great. It's an honor actually to be here.
And you know, for so many years, the World Wrestling Federation used to call Madison Square Garden home. They couldn't have scripted a better finish to this event, right? Having Conor McGregor finally get those two belts after some scolding to the UFC brass, lifting them over his shoulders, the promo in the cage. I mean, if Conor wasn't the biggest star in the UFC, if he wasn't one of the biggest stars as far as sports are concerned in the entire world, he certainly cemented that tonight, right? Doesn't it feel like he just went up a few notches after this lone victory here?
For so many stars in the UFC that we've seen, the bigger the escalation that kind of went on, the more, like, if they stepped up to the occasion, it would be very memorable. Like, for instance, when Anderson Silva at UFC 101 and he kind of bewitched Forrest Griffin, that was a very memorable moment because you're like, wow, this guy's fighting at 205 and he looks that much better still. There's something about Conor McGregor who keeps escalating his own mystique to the next level, and yet he keeps outdoing himself. Tonight was his virtuoso performance. I mean, that was as good as it gets. To beat a guy of Eddie Alvarez's caliber in this building, you know, in this historic event where people are trying to give him these generous comparisons to Ali and all this stuff, and you're like, let's cool it on that stuff. But then he comes in here and does this, and he makes a guy. Nobody beats Eddie Alvarez like this. You know, this guy's a guy who just went through 3 champions to be in this spot and had a lot to prove. This was his whole motivation. And he just gets taken apart like that. I mean, this is one of those things. You're right. You will remember this because it'd be like, here was Conor McGregor, just showing you that we haven't even begun to. Like, his depths are real. They're real, and we're still sort of figuring out just how deep they go.
Yeah, and his coach John Kavanagh nailing his prediction almost to the exact minute. He wins via second-round TKO. Are you surprised that, you know, with all due respect to Eddie, that it went that smoothly for Conor? Eddie really had nothing for Conor McGregor tonight.
Man, I don't even know if we can quite put in perspective what just happened because we're so close to it. I feel like that we'll only be able to actually look back at this as something, I mean, just a marvel that it truly was in a few years from now, because I just can't wrap my brain around what happened. Like you said, Eddie Alvarez is, one of the toughest guys to ever do this. He's been a champion on multiple continents. He's a grizzled veteran, and no one has ever done. He only had 4 losses his entire career. The guy's been fighting for a very long time. Never been beaten like that. Conor McGregor, came out 2 days ago wearing a white mink coat. And he was just trolling. He was just trolling everyone, having a good time. Was talking, right now about how he was just basically shopping all week, with his girlfriend who is expecting now and enjoying New York. Then he comes in and he finishes Eddie Alvarez like it was nothing. I mean, he picked him apart. I felt like he could almost have even finished him in the first round. He almost was toying with him in a sense, which is things that he said he would do. It's amazing to me at Madison Square Garden in front of 20,000 people. Yeah. When he finished in the second round, we were up on the Chase Bridge at the very top of Madison Square Garden, it was shaking. I was actually almost a little bit frightened. It was shaking. Like I was like typing, and I was like, it was crazy. I can't even wrap my head around it right now.
And he, there's a moment where he puts his arms behind his back. Now, when somebody else is hamming it up, now again, I'm making an Anderson Silva reference, doing something like that, there was still some doubt. You're like, oh, maybe you're doing a little bit too much. But I didn't even feel like he was messing with him. That's how masterful his kind of performance was. You just felt like maybe it was just part of what he was doing. Yeah. And then he explains up here that he did have a hurt hand, and that actually went into his thinking in this. And I just feel like he's just that methodical going in there. But his ability to marry his instinctive, like what he's thinking and visualization to the actual event is second to none. Probably the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, he actually said that his left foot was a little banged up after the Diaz fight, and his right hand as well. So actually, one of the fine gentlemen that works for the Mac Life actually showed me photos of him doing that in sparring with Artem Lobov, that exact move. So you talk about his presence of mind, understanding history, calling these things, and then he wins the fight, and there's no second belt. I mean, what a blunder this is, right? And they have to go to the back and get Tyron Woodley, who was in his crosshairs all week, to give up the belt. And it's clear that Woodley wasn't all that happy about that, but he was being a good soldier, so to speak, and gives it up. And then the promo, if you will, saying, "I'd like to apologize to absolutely no one." I mean, it was straight out of the Rock's playbook. To do that in New York, as you mentioned, at Madison Square Garden on this stage, it just feels like, wow, he really saved his best for this moment.
This is a man who thinks in the big picture. Yeah. I mean, he thinks in the big picture, and he pulls it off every time. I mean, that was brilliant, because you're sitting there thinking like, humility and him just don't go together. And when he's even saying that, what is this ruse? You're almost like, oh, but or is he actually doing? You don't know. He's just a little bit unpredictable. And then he says that, and you're like, of course he says that. He's masterful. I mean, we saw him during his whole ACL recovery basically light the featherweight world on fire. Put a fire on. Everybody wants to fight him while he's away. Then he's sitting there talking about Nurmagomedov coming back through his injuries and all this. He's very smart in how he handles himself. All told, like he's already planting the seeds, obviously with Tyron Woodley. He's already kind of planting the seeds even with Nurmagomedov, because he just knows what to say and when to say it. So he's a smart man. He's a smart man.
And he has an amazing ability to continue to deliver news in the sense of, delivering headlines and keeping us interested and always dropping clues at these post-fight press conferences. Back in August when he defeated Nate Diaz, he said shit's about to hit the fan. Yeah. Well, it didn't really hit the fan because here he was at MSG, but now he's really putting his foot down. So first he tells us that he's going to be a father he said March, and then he was corrected by his girlfriend, Dee Devlin, telling him that it was May.
And then he's such a smart man after all.
Yes, and then he admits that he's actually really nervous about it. He doesn't even know what the sex is. He's very nervous about it. It was actually a very human moment, and I think a moment that a lot of people can relate to. And for the record, that is what Dana White was referring to when he said that Conor has some big, announcement to make. So everyone can calm down now. That was the announcement. It was personal. It was not for any of us to share. He did it on this stage, and congratulations to him and his girlfriend. But he also says that he wants to take some time. On top of that, he says, I want a piece of this company. I want some equity. I have not even been approached to, as far as a business conversation is concerned, by the new ownership. Conan O'Brien has a piece of this company. Where's my piece? He's really putting his foot down. He's not mincing words. He's telling them what he wants. What do you think happens here? Because we've never heard someone talk about the UFC quite like this before.
I mean, he's been saying it for, I think, over a year now, how he wanted to be almost on equal ground as Dana White and the Fertittas. Well, now the Fertittas are gone. WME, IMG, and a host of other companies now on the UFC. And like you said, he he hasn't even been approached by them yet, which I think is strange.
Baffling.
I'm not sure what's going on there. And how do you think he must have felt when that announcement came out that, this list of celebrities, a mile long, now own a piece of the UFC? Here's a guy who actually gets into the octagon and fights every 3 months, every 4 months for the last 2+ years, and never even been approached about owning a part of the UFC. I could imagine him being upset because he also was the biggest earner for that company. I think that they're going to have to come to him. They're going to have to do something because look what happened here. $17.7 million gate, maybe the pay-per-view record. He just ran through Eddie Alvarez. I mean, he's a lightweight champion. He's a featherweight champion. I mean, what else more can you say about the guy? They have to go to him, maybe on their knees.
Right, and this idea that he has to drop one of the belts when he's one of the most active fighters, let alone champions in the UFC. And if you can clone that guy and put him in 2 weight classes, why wouldn't you do that? Look at the numbers that he generates. So let's just say they give him a boatload of money, he's an owner, everything's hunky-dory, he has a kid, all is well, and he's ready to return, let's say, summertime, springtime, fall time, whatever. These are your options for Conor McGregor. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Jose Aldo at 145, Tyron Woodley at 170, or someone else. What do you do? Where does he go? No one has this many options.
Well, and he kind of mentions that, right? But
Yeah.
you get the idea that he has his hands on the levers at this point, and he can sway things to be where he wants them. Now, which of those guys that would be, I don't know. We look at guys like Nurmagomedov, obviously, and we think like, ooh, that's if anybody could maybe cancel out what he does well, it might be a guy like him. It's not just the wrestling; it's just the sheer determination, that dogged approach to fighting. And we saw it tonight when he was fighting Michael Johnson, getting picked apart in the stand-up early, but then he just takes the fight over and got his bearings, and it was like his fight. I don't know if that would be the fight that he would take, and I think that's what he might have been doing tonight by saying, like, well, yeah, he's got to be a consistent guy. I don't want to fight a guy who might not show up. This is about me, too. So I don't think it'd be him, but I could see a guy like Tony Ferguson sneaking in there and getting it. I just don't believe he'll go up to 170 right away. I just don't think that will happen. I know that they're planting the seeds, but that's down the road. I don't think that's happening yet. I could also see the Nate Diaz thing.
That's right.
Trumping everything and getting you could see something like that just because it is a moneymaker.
Nate Diaz, who was in New York with his brother Nick Diaz, who told me he tried very hard to get a ticket to this event, but could not get one. He could not score a ticket. He had to watch it from somewhere outside of Madison Square Garden. So we could stand here and talk about that particular fight and Conor's moment for 2 hours. But there were, in fact, other fights. So let's talk about those fights. In the co-main event, Tyron Woodley fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for the welterweight title. It was Tyron Woodley's first title defense. Initially, Bruce Buffer announces Woodley as the champion via split decision, but then in a bizarre scene straight out of Steve Harvey's playbook, they come back and announce a majority draw. 2 judges scored it 47-47. One judge had it 48-47 for Tyron Woodley. Majority draw, so he retains the title, but he doesn't walk away with that W. Do you agree with the 2 judges that scored it a draw, or the one judge who had it for Woodley, or none of them?
I actually had a different score.
Oh, wonderful.
Wonder Boy, wonderful.
Okay.
All those scores are actually, I think, acceptable. I had it 48-46 for Woodley. I thought he had a 10-8 in the 4th round when he nearly finished on multiple occasions, Wonder Boy. But I'm fine with any one of those scores. It was a really, really close fight. And that 3rd round is the one that I think is the most disputed one, because I think most people agree. I mean, it's indisputable that Woodley won the 1st round. Wonder Boy won the 2nd round. The 3rd round was very close. Some judges had it going to Wonder Boy, some had it going to Woodley. Woodley obviously won the 4th round, and I think Wonder Boy won the 5th round pretty clearly. The 3rd round was in dispute. The weird thing here is that that 1st round, which most people scored 10-9, was scored by Judge Douglas Crosby, a friend of ours, 10-8. Mr. Crosby did not score the 4th round for Woodley 10-8, but he scored the 1st round for Woodley 10-8. So that's how he came to his 47-47 score, which was kind of an anomaly in that scorecard. I don't have any problem with the draw. I think that you could have even said Wonder Boy 48-47, wouldn't have had a problem with that. It was a very, very, very close fight. Weird scores, but run it back, I guess. That's the only thing you could do.
Okay, do you agree with that? Considering it's a majority draw, do you run it back or do you give it to Damian Maia? This is shades of UFC 125, right? When Edgar fought Maynard, you had Anthony Pettis sitting there and they didn't give him the shot. What do you do?
That's always the tricky thing about a draw. But it's also the tricky thing about a good fight.
Yeah.
Because I felt like that's really what we saw. I mean, the way it played out was really, and I agree with your scores 100%. Well, not your score per se, but where the trickiness was is that 3rd round. I was just like, I went Woodley, but if I watched again, who knows? I mean, it was so close to me. And then I did not score the next round a 10-8. I thought it was a 10-9. So, I mean, I still would have given it to Woodley, but the draw seemed perfectly acceptable. It's just strange that some people got there in a roundabout way. But, yeah, I mean, when it's a good fight like that and they there's this dramatic swing, like those types of dramatic swings, it makes it very difficult to say, like, we don't really want to capitalize on a second fight where nothing was resolved. in that division now, that's an unresolved issue, and I think that that's the only way to do it. Even though Damian Maia's right there, I just think you got to still resolve the issue first. I feel bad for Damian Maia because he's done everything possible to get that shot. But the welterweight division in particular is just always so hard to figure out at the top, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I feel like now when you get the draw and you get a good fight where it's back and forth, wasn't that the fight of the night? Or was that?
It was.
Okay, so it's like, and then you get all that. I just feel like all that contributes to just finding resolution for that.
Yeah, and you wonder if they do that fight maybe in St. Louis to give it a whole other layer of intrigue. Tyron Woodley saying that he would love to fight in St. Louis. It would be nice for him to get cheered a little bit, and I think that would give this sort of rivalry that is brewing, a fresh coat of paint. Although it was nice to see them kind of kiss and make up. Actually, Tyron Woodley publicly apologizing to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for some of the things that he said about him. And you wonder if tonight when he goes to sleep, if he'll be thinking about that sequence where he had him on the ropes, he had him on the fence, but went for the submission instead of trying to finish him with strikes. It seemed like he was oh so close to actually finishing Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Okay, let's move along to the third title fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk successfully defends her title against fellow Pole Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Were you surprised at how tough Kowalkiewicz was? She really, I mean, even Joanna had a bit of a hematoma.
Yeah.
She, in my opinion, was maybe her toughest test in the UFC. Were you surprised at what she did out there?
No, actually, not totally surprised. I wouldn't say she was the toughest test. I still think Gadelha was the toughest test so far, but I watched Kowalkiewicz in Invicta, KSW, and now here, and I'm not surprised. I won't add on the qualifier to that Nate Diaz said, but I'm not surprised by that. She's incredibly tough, and she's not just tough, she's good. I mean, she's legitimately good. She's very skilled. She's great in the clinch. She's got really good boxing, and she hit Joanna a lot. She hit her even in the early rounds that Joanna was winning. She was hitting her. That hematoma was actually jarringly large. Not surprised. I think that she actually won a lot of fans. They gave her like a standing ovation. Even more, she got a bigger pop than Joanna did. Very impressed with her.
Yeah, and there are some interesting options at 115. It's not as, I think, clear-cut as far as like number one contender, the welterweight division, the lightweight division. Karolina making a strong case to do an immediate rematch in Poland, predicts that she will win. You also have Jessica Andrade, who had a nice win over Joanne Calderwood back in September. Alexa Grasso made her debut last week. She looked good. Do you like the idea of an immediate rematch, or do you switch it up?
I mean, that's a lot harder. This one's a lot harder. But if you don't have any clear-cut contenders that are right there, I don't have any problem with them replaying it because it was an entertaining fight. And I will say this about Karolina too. It did seem like she came across really well here. Yeah. She comes out to Iggy Pop, and her relaxed demeanor. It's so fun to watch her as she gets prepared. She was, I thought she was a little overmatched through the first, half of that fight. But then she catches her, you know what I mean? It kind of turns the tables a little bit. It made for some interesting drama. If there was somebody else, like if Andrade is ready, if she's ready to go, I wouldn't mind seeing something in between. But if they played it back, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Joanna looked to be, any of the questions about her changing camps, midway title reign, those are out the window. She looked to be in phenomenal shape and once again cementing her place as one of the most dominant champions in recent UFC history. Her reign is just second to that of Demetrius Johnson. So you have to tip your cap to Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Okay, let's move along now. Yoel Romero, he defeats Chris Weidman via vicious flying knee in the third round. Weidman goes for the takedown, and Romero timed it perfectly. He jumps over the cage, starts doing this sort of soldier of God strut, if you will. It was very interesting, and then even more interesting was his post-fight comments. And how about that? Michael Bisping, sitting in the rafters of Madison Square Garden working for Fox. They have an amazing exchange, and Joe Rogan tells the entire audience that Romero is the number one contender at 185 pounds. Are you surprised that he got it done in this setting, considering everything that Weidman had going for him? He's fighting in New York. This is a moment that he's been dreaming about in the third round. To catch Weidman in a sequence like that, considering who Weidman is and his background, were you surprised by the result?
I'm surprised by how it went down, but you can never be too surprised by anything that Yoel Romero does because he is a wild card. I mean, the guy is so unpredictable. You just can't predict. You just don't know what the heck the guy's gonna do next. To win by flying knee in the third round, close fight up until that point. It was really almost up for grabs. Could have been Weidman's fight there very easily. Weidman kind of shoots in, and Romero just almost takes his head off. That was just brutal. The way that Weidman's head snapped to the side. Wow, I mean, Romero is just a different kind of athlete.
Yeah, and unlike Tony Ferguson last week, he really takes advantage of his mic time and starts calling out Bisping. I mean, it was just brilliant stuff, and it got a lot of people, I think, excited for him to fight for the belt, as opposed to Jacare, who just doesn't have a lot of momentum behind him. Do you like that fight? Is that the fight to make, considering how the division now shakes out?
Well, it's funny because we talked about this before coming in. We said if Chris Weidman can finish it emphatically, that would be a slam dunk, and then we get the opposite. But I think it works the same. It just didn't fit the narrative of this guy coming home and he doesn't get it. But I still think that he distinguished himself and did it violently. And it's always really interesting to watch that guy. Like you said, he's got a flair for dramatics and unexpected, bizarre things happen. But he also sort of starts slow. It almost seems like he's hesitant to do anything for a while in his fights. It takes him a while to warm up. But once he lands something, it's always just so devastating, I feel like. Or weird turns and all this stuff, but he looked great, and it was a perfect moment, honestly, for Michael Bisping, who we've been on this. There's just 4 guys out there, and I feel like because that other one is off, the timing obviously factors in. But you're at MSG, everybody's watching, on this thing, and you have this moment. So it's like you set up the next fight. I feel like it couldn't have worked out better for either guy.
Yeah, hard not to feel for Weidman, who had done so much to get the sport legalized, lobbying, going to Albany, coming to the press conferences, and comes out to this remix of all of these great homages to New York. Unfortunately for him, he now suffers his second straight loss. It feels like it was ages ago when he defeated Vitor Belfort when he was champion back at UFC 187. Okay, now let's move along to more news. Chock full of news here tonight at Madison Square Garden. We could go hours, as our cameraman is actually yawning in front of me right now. You did not see that, but I did. And if you're wondering, by the way, about my voice, you can thank those Irish fans outside of MSG Friday night. That is, in fact, why I sound this way. Let me ask you about Misha Tate. She loses to Raquel Pennington in the pay-per-view opener. Pennington skunked her. I don't think anyone saw this coming. And then the shocker, Misha Tate in the cage announces her retirement. Did you see this coming?
How crazy is UFC 205 that the 8th headline is Misha Tate, a women's MMA pioneer, one of the most popular women to ever fight in the UFC. Her retirement is not even one of the top headlines. It's just a crazy night. Totally taken to, definitely off guard. I thought she looked really good at weigh-ins, way better than she did at UFC 200, where she came in almost after the time, almost overweight. I thought she looked fine. Did not look great in the fight. Maybe her mind was elsewhere. It seemed like there's a lot of things going on, maybe in her personal life, possibly even some injuries. And she's hanging it up, I guess. And she has to be remembered as one of the really true pioneers. She's been in some iconic moments, some of the most iconic moments, not just in women's MMA, but in the UFC and back in Strikeforce. It definitely came as a bit of a shock.
And how about this anecdote from Dana White at the post-fight press conference? Says that he was trying to convince Misha Tate to go to the hospital afterwards, and she told him, "F you, I no longer work for you. I don't have to listen to you anymore." Eventually, she agrees to go, but wow, Misha Tate all of a sudden retiring, and she's, what is she, 30 years old, just turned 30? Very young woman. Do you chalk this one up to, emotions, losing like that, losing 2 in a row, just lost her belt, or do you really think that was the last we ever see of Misha Tate inside the octagon?
Very difficult to say after something like that. She didn't look right. There was no moment in that fight where I thought she looked like herself. But you're hearing little things that maybe she's injured. You never know what's going on. But I certainly didn't expect her to say that. And you wonder sometimes if that's something she's been kicking around beyond going into this fight, or if it's something that was really occurring to her toward the end. And
well, you remember, by the way, when she didn't get the Ronda Rousey fight and they went with Holly Holm, she actually threatened and flirted with the idea of retiring.
Sometimes, too, we've seen it a million times, especially with people that young. You can, you think that's what you want, and then you realize, hey, man, I'm no longer on Good Morning America, or I'm not doing these things that I was doing back then. And, let's face it, she was, she goes into, first of all, the fabric of the whole women's division. She goes into Ronda Rousey's stardom, even if that's not in the right way she likes it, but she does. If that rivalry doesn't exist, who knows how quickly Ronda shoots up to where she did. And a lot of people wanted to see that rematch, and it still looms out there. It's still a money fight, if especially if Ronda loses, and at some point you say, well, this now makes sense on the other level. These guys are both, So you never know. But I would say that it's always wait and see with this, but I would say she sounded pretty sure, but she also sounded very detached from that. She wasn't like she was emotional up there or anything like that. So it could be just the moment.
Also of note tonight, and let's not take anything away, by the way, from Raquel Pennington, who has really, she was a 500 fighter for a long time, and she's really come into her own as of late, developed into a great mixed martial artist. Of course, also of note, Khabib Nurmagomedov with a very dominant win over Michael Johnson, and his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan as well, very memorable, doing the complete opposite of Tony Ferguson last week, calling out Conor McGregor, calling him a chicken, calling out the country of Ireland. I mean, just drowned by boos, but it was great stuff, I thought, from Khabib Nurmagomedov, even calling out the UFC for not giving him a title shot. Frankie Edgar, Tom's River's own, defeats Jeremy Steven in a very entertaining and hard-fought battle. Also, Tim Boach with a nice win over Sapo Natal. Vicente Luque with a knockout win. I thought that was very impressive over Bilal Muhammad.
That feels like it was eons ago. That
I know.
fight.
Well, how about Jim Miller's win over Thiago Alves? And, of course, Liz Carmouche making her own history tonight. She is the first woman to ever win inside the octagon at Madison Square Garden. She competed in the first ever fight at Madison Square Garden in UFC history, and also way back when, you'll recall that she fought Ronda Rousey in the first ever women's title fight in UFC history. So Liz Carmouche making her own history here tonight. So guys, let us wrap it up, because like I said, we could go hours here, but at some point we have to go home. They're going to kick us out of this building. Give me a memory, a moment, something that you'll remember from this week here in New York City. We've been talking about this for so long, years in the making. It's almost surreal that it's over at this point, that we can now move on and not talk about the first ever event at Madison Square Garden. Is there something that sticks out for you?
Yeah, Conor McGregor wins the lightweight title. He makes history by becoming the first UFC fighter to win belts in 2 different weight classes at the same time. He dismantles Eddie Alvarez and still has the presence of mind in the post-fight press conference to say, where the F is my belt? Yeah. He was already thinking ahead. This was obviously something that he envisioned even before the fight. He was so confident that he would beat Alvarez that he was already thinking about the photos and about him holding 2 belts on his shoulders. And he had the presence of mind to Joe Rogan to say, where's my other belt? Where is it? It was crazy to me that he was already thinking, like, the emotion and the adrenaline and nothing really even mattered. He had the poise and the calm and the presence of mind to be thinking about the photo op and about that image. It's just amazing to me. I can't even fathom that.
Unbelievable. What about you?
Mine would be a little more personal. I moved out here to the East Coast in 2010, and I guess so. It sort of really coincides with this fight to get into New York, right? And as these things kind of happen, you start to take for granted. Here we are, and you're kind of going through the motions because you've been through fight weeks. But today, I'm riding the train, and it just finally hits you. Like, I'm riding the train. I'm going to get off, and I'm going to go straight over to 31st and 8th, and that's where I'm at. We're going to Madison Square Garden, and it really hit me like how cool that was. Yeah. And I feel like the moment finally where I was like, it's here, it's happening it's tonight, and I got excited about it, and I thought the night was it played out as epically as it possibly could. I thought the UFC benefited from just about every storyline that came out of that, except for maybe Misha Tate, but you never know, they might benefit from that at some point too. But the whole thing just kind of came together just right, but it kind of put a cap on the week to actually have it hit you as you're kind of rolling into town.
Yeah, they have pictures all over this great arena of the historic moments that happened here. Hulk Hogan winning the belt over the Iron Sheik, WrestleMania 1, the Knicks making it to the finals, all the great college basketball games, the Rangers in '94. Now I can fully, envision the picture of Conor McGregor holding those 2 belts being somewhere in this arena, and that's a pretty crazy thing. I'll throw out 2 others of my own. Seeing Mark Ratner, the UFC's VP of Regulatory Affairs at the weigh-ins yesterday, who worked so hard, who made countless trips to Albany to get this done, walking around yesterday like he was at his daughter's wedding with a massive smile on his face, just looking at his baby all grown up, I think was just an amazing moment that I'll never forget. And I'll throw this one out there, and it maybe is out of left field, and, figures that the lone Canadian would bring this up, but it was a very bizarre week to cover a mixed martial arts event, let alone a historic one, a very emotional week for a lot of people living in this city and across this great country. And there were times where, you kind of started to wonder, what are you doing here covering this stuff? Mink coats, chairs being thrown when all this other stuff is going on. In fact, protests are being held just outside this building. And I think it was, once again, an example of how sports can be an escape valve for us, because I think I could speak for both of us, or I should say all 3 of us, including our crew, Casey and Esther, that maybe for a couple hours thanks to Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez, we forgot about all the craziness going on just for a couple hours. It doesn't erase anything that happened earlier. It won't make anything better after on if you are not happy with the way things turned out, but that's the beauty of sports. And Conor McGregor's moment of holding those two belts, maybe for a brief moment for not only us, but all of you at home, maybe it allowed you to forget about things and just enjoy the moment and be happy and smile and just be proud of being a mixed martial arts fan, because we have been talking about this moment for so damn long. We finally got here, and to actually make history in the final fight of the night is something that no one could have scripted. So it was an honor to cover this event. It was an honor to be here with you guys and everyone at home. Thank you so much for watching our coverage all week from here in New York City. We will say good night or good morning to you. We can't thank you enough for all the kind words, for you guys checking out our coverage. It really means the world, and we do it for all of you. We truly, truly do. It is such a pleasure to cover this sport, and it was such an honor and pleasure to be here at MSG covering this historic event. Good night. Thank you again. We're coming back on Monday for a very fun MMA hour. We've got a lot to discuss, but for now, good night, and thank you so much from Madison Square Garden.